And welcome to Korean Cinema Today, the podcast of the Korean Film Council. It's a pleasure to be back here again with our same guest, Dr. Brian Yecies, and we're in the middle of a fascinating discussion on the current ties between the Chinese and Korean film industries. So I'm your co-host, Pierce Conran, a writer for the Korean Film Council. That's koreanfilm.or.kr. And I'm joined once again, by my co-host, June.
Hello, everyone. Just a reminder to visit our website, koreanfilm.org, and also visit our social media, Facebook/KoBiz.KoFic, and our Twitter /KoreanFilmBiz.
And to catch up on all the latest news on Korean film, make sure to go on that site. Once again, that's koreanfilm.or.kr. And you can also check out our webzine, which is called Korean Cinema Today, and our newsletter. And to tune in again to this podcast, you can search for us, search Korean Cinema Today on iTunes. So once again, we have Dr. Brian Yecies, who is part of the Cultural Studies program at the University of Wollongong, as well as the co-author, along with Lee Kyung-shim, of the book Korea's Occupied Cinemas, 1893 to 1948. Welcome back, Brian.
Good to be here. Thanks.
So just continuing from our last conversation between China and Korea film industries, there is actually a Beijing office that the Korean Film Council has set up. We would like to talk about a little bit about the offices and the activities that they do there. They are actively fostering new co-productions, and though it's at their early days, has this venture been a success in your opinion?
That's a good question. The KoFic office in Beijing. Well, it's one of several offices. You got Tokyo, Los Angeles, New York, and Beijing, not necessarily established in those orders. Now, I've been to the Beijing office multiple times, and I got to tell you, the place is built like a fortress, or at least they run it like a fortress. What I mean by that is that they are very busy. They have a very, quite, I would say, narrow agenda. To make sure or to facilitate not only the coming together, the networking of people from both industries, but to bring some of these official co-productions to fruition. So I get that. I appreciate that. But the kind of whole fortress idea, I think, gives us some food for thought in terms of opening up the office, making some of those wonderful internal publications designed specifically for the people in the room at those networking events. They have wonderful annual networking events. I was lucky enough to sneak into one, 2012, I believe, where, if I'm not mistaken, Ethan Park gave a demo of the digital intermediary that he did for Nom Nom Nom. Wonderful presentation. Might have even been 2000, was it 2008? Yeah, actually, it couldn't have been 2012.
That's
after
the film.
2008.
Yeah.
And yes, I did sneak in, and with Lee Chi-yun, as a matter of fact. But the KoFic office, as one of a small number of cultural offices, is doing some really important work. It is official co-production, so a lot of the unofficial and organic collaboration that's occurring is off their radar, and that's okay. That makes sense. But again, let me go back to this idea of opening up. I think if some of those networking event books, publications that KoFic Beijing produces, if they were made available a bit wider, to a wider audience, that could be really helpful for educating aspiring young filmmakers on both sides to get a better insight or to get more insight into who they're dealing with on both sides. So I look forward to that. I look forward to that opening up of the materials. But I would like to say that, and here I am going on, but the point is that the KoFic office is a very unique and very special office, not because of who's inside or who's not allowed in, but because the Chinese film industry cannot have such an office in New York, cannot have such an office in Sydney. And what I mean by that is I've met with the China Film Co-Production Corporation, the directors and the assistant directors of that government organization, and I thought, why don't you guys? And I've asked them, why don't you have offices to promote your industry around the world? And it occurred to me that because of the sensitivities, the cultural and political sensitivities of opening such offices for China does not go over or is not quite the same as Korea opening up such an office. And I have read, maybe you have read this, that over the last 6 years, the number of Chinese Confucian or Chinese cultural centers that have sprung up around the world have I don't know how many they number, maybe 30. Some of them have actually been asked to close recently in Canada. And I'm not fully aware of the circumstances behind it. But I think, generally speaking, they point to this cultural and political sensitivity of having such a cultural office open up in a foreign country. KoFic doesn't seem to be limited or scrutinized in the same way that a Chinese cultural office would be approached, and I think we could look a little bit more into that a bit more rigorously, but that puts KoFic in a very special context. And so the Beijing KoFic office is very lucky to be there, and they're doing good work, but for a fairly limited sector of the industry. And I think that's how much they can handle it at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I see your point absolutely about, China not having the same kind of offices in other countries. But then again, KoFic is somewhat of a unique entity. I think I write for them. I'm horribly biased, but I can't think of another country which has a governmental film body that is as effective at promoting its own industry and enabling its own industry and promoting it overseas, and even kind of adding ties to other countries. That seems rather unique. But again, I'm biased, so I would say that. Speaking to kind of continue discussion on the Korean Film Council in Beijing and these co-productions that they're trying to activate, as you said, official co-productions. And since we say official, this year was a landmark year for Korean and Chinese film ties because of the signing of the co-production treaty, a document which has been kind of in the works since 2011. So what are the implications of that treaty actually being ratified this year?
Well, when we're dealing with China and the Chinese film industry, I think it's unique. Any industry is unique, but for example, when the New Zealand-South Korean co-production agreement was signed, very little, unfortunately, despite interest, very little has come out of that. And so I don't think we could hold that or would expect something similar to happen. I think the Chinese-Korean agreement will lead to some really great things. Literally, some productions and projects that will benefit both industries. Having said that, based on China's sheer size and current financial, the current environment of spending, for example, on media companies, Korea could end up possibly as a weaker partner in some deals. Possibly. It's too early to tell. I do know that Australia and China have had many years of free trade agreement talks. And a lot of critics have said, well, that will benefit China more because it'll give China unprecedented access to the Australian market. But what will that give the partner country and partner countries' companies? Not quite the same benefit. So I have mixed views about its potential, but I do think it's necessary to move forward. But you see, don't forget that the agreement comes after years of official and unofficial projects that have already happened. So we certainly don't need such a policy instrument to bring two sides together, because we've already seen that. So what is it for then?
I mean, I guess part of it, but this has already happened, is with the quota, of course. I think 34 films that are not Chinese are allowed into theaters every year. And by making these official co-productions, it bypasses that, of course.
Absolutely. That's the single benefit, the greatest benefit for our co-production. It's considered local or domestic film in both countries, both markets. But that doesn't take into consideration the ancillary markets where such quotas don't exist, as far as I know. So Youku, LetTV, all these video platforms in China, which have hundreds of millions of daily eyeballs, viewers. Korean films are plentiful in that VOD space, where a quota didn't really have much bearing. So yes, the policy is great for big theatrical releases, but that's not the be-all, end-all.
No, but as we've kind of been looking at it, there's a lot of money. And I guess even you talk about an imbalance with where China might have an unbalanced kind of access to other markets with these kind of free trade agreements. Even if Korea can only get a drop in the bucket, we are talking about the biggest bucket that we've ever seen. So it's not an insignificant amount of potential income.
But also, apart from the quota of imported films in China, there's still a limited number of any country's films, including Chinese films, that can be shown on big screens.
Absolutely.
And just because you add a zero to the number of cinemas, multiplex cinemas, by the way, in China, doesn't increase the number of films needed for those screens, because you're just extending the screen time of a core number of films. I mean, potentially you could be opening up the door for more films, but I suspect that it'll still be the same number, but just an increased number of prints of the same films.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's perhaps something that might change over time, but I guess the clutch thing right now is to be one of those films and get on Chinese screens.
Yeah, but that's only half the battle. Okay, so getting onto the screen, and this is going to open up a great aspect of our podcast today, because now we can get into the qualitative aspects of the collaboration. And at the moment, films like Mr. Go and Sector 7, films that did make it onto the big screen, didn't really win over local audiences. So despite the fact that they got on the screen, they fizzled out.
Well, the interesting case of Mr. Go is a film that cost too much money and didn't ultimately make it back in the end, and which was a quarter financed by a Chinese company. But the film tanked in Korea. It had less than 1 million admissions here, or maybe just over 1 million admissions. But it made significantly more money in China, and even though that was not a successful run, that's kind of turned an enormous write-off into a much slimmer one. So I think Showbox, the company behind that, we're very grateful for that.
But don't forget, that's also dependent on pre-sales and the deal that was negotiated.
That's true. I have no idea what kind of a revenue share they had, but considering that it was part financed there, they must have had something slightly more favorable than a film that would have completely foreign. But that's complete speculation on my part.
Yeah, well, I would agree with your speculation. I know that in the case of Bait, the 2012 3D Australian shark film, did about it recouped because of timing, because it was 3D and there were not very many 3D films at the time in October, November 2012 to compete with it. It got some wonderful screen time, 2,900 screens in China, and there are only 2/3 of the number of screens in Australia or Korea for the moment. So the film recouped about 85% of its budget in box office, right? But the film was pre-sold to China for about $3 million because they had no idea that it would reach 10 times as much of that. They were happy to get the $3 million, but then it went on to do nearly $30 million in box office, which the distributors did not get a piece of.
So they had no back end deal on that. It was just an upfront.
They were just happy to sell to offload it. So yeah, we were missing some of those critical elements, and we may or may not ever know the full details.
That's true. But again, in Mr. Go's case, because the film cost $25 million, which is a budget that is unsustainable for the Korean market. So they were banking on the film making money in China. Plus, they cast there was a Korean actress, Chinese actress in the film. So I think that there must have been a deal. Again, speculation on my part. That there must have been a deal where if the film blows up in China, they can make back that enormous budget.
We hope. And then we don't have to send the translator to subject the translators to any kind of punishment syndrome. Having said that, what it did, no matter what the numbers are, Mr. Go enabled Dexter to strengthen its existing friendships in the Chinese market and in the Chinese industry. And when we talk about doing business in China, the long-term working together, relationship building is critical to future opportunities. And for that, I think Mr. Go is an incredibly important film, in spite of its challenges or its setbacks. So well done, Dexter.
Okay, so now just adding on to the co-production treaty, there are many co-productions that boomed since the agreement happened. But there are also a lot of Korean stars that end up appearing in Chinese films nowadays, including a few that released in November, including Bad Sister with Ji Jin-hee. Just wondering, have these casting efforts been successful?
I was hoping to ask you that question. I know you're a big fan of some of these Korean stars. So what do you think? Do you think that they're opening the door for more scenarios like that?
I think what's interesting is that some of these Korean actors that are being casted in Chinese films are not as huge names in the domestic film industry. And so I think it could be a big chance for them if the film actually does do well, then they might put their foot into the Chinese industry and actually end up having a fan base there, which kind of happened with one of the actresses in The Boundary, Chu Jaeyeon. Although this film is not doing wonderfully well, but her role in a TV series brought her into stardom in China, and she has been active there since. So I think it is a big opportunity for some of the actors that do get casted there, but from the numbers that we've been looking at, the box office results aren't making a big mark with the Korean stars.
I guess it can be very mixed. It's hard to know the impact of one person in a film. When there's one or two Korean stars in a Chinese film that is mostly Chinese actors, it's hard to know what the kind of tangible aspect of having that star in the film. But there are two people that I think are huge names in China right now. And it's the reason everyone is drinking beer and eating fried chicken now. There was the TV show, Korean TV show, My Love to the Stars, My Love from the Stars, with, of course, Jun Ji-hyun, who also goes by the English name Gianna Jun, and the hugely white-hot star Kim Soo-yeon. Not to be confused with another actress called Kim Soo-yeon, who is starring in the new Avengers film. This series just took off in China in a way. I mean, it literally had billions of views. Extraordinary. And these people are huge stars now in China. So it's and I mean I bet that Kim Soo-yeon is getting lots and lots of casting calls from China, and I started to think how much he's being offered.
Well, casting is an interesting discussion topic because professional or industry standard casting strategies have only come online in the Chinese film industry over the last couple of years. The translator that I went around China with in 2008 happened to have been working very closely with the Bruce Beresford crew for when they were shooting Mao's Last Dancer in China. And at that time, casting was an area that seemed to be lacking significantly in terms of how do you do it? What's the process for doing that? How do you begin that? What are the contracts like? There's a running joke about contracts between Hollywood, China, and Korea. I mean, the Hollywood contract is about 50 pages long. The Korean contract is about, generally, these film production contracts. Korean contract 15 pages, China contract 1 page. So that points to a cultural practice, an industrial practice. But casting is an area that we will see a lot of maturity starting to come online in the Chinese industry as they learn from their Korean, Australian, and U.S. counterparts, and Canadian, French, and so forth. So I just thought I'd put a plug in for the casting since you brought it up.
Absolutely, and on that same note, it's like this idea of the star system. You have this huge industry, and obviously it's going to have an enormous star system. At the moment, there are a few very big names in China. I mean, Fan Bingbing comes to mind. But the star system is you used the word maturity, so I guess I would put it in its infancy at the moment. And it's very interesting to see how that will develop, and perhaps to see how the Korean element could develop within that. Another aspect of kind of a Korea making waves in China are actually Korean exhibitors. I'm speaking of CGV, which is run by CJ Entertainment, or is the same company rather, and Lotte Cinemas, which is part of the Lotte Corporation, which also incorporates Lotte Entertainment, the movie studio. Now, they operate multiplexes in China. I know CGV has been active since 2006, and they've been growing a little bit every year, at least adding new multiplexes every year. But what is your view on their success in that market? Again, the exhibition sector is one that's growing at 35% a year, roughly. And so, is it difficult for a Korean company to come in and make a mark there?
Again, I think that's a great question. That's one of our most difficult questions to answer. That's a crystal ball question. I get the sense that they would love to be vertically integrated there. The companies that you mentioned, the CJ and the Lotte, and I get the sense that they would love to be vertically integrated in the same way that they did so here and more than 10, 15 years ago. So I think that's on their radar. I also think that having said that, they are trying to produce some of their own localized stories. And in my dealings with a couple of CJ people on the ground, that seems to be one of the most challenging aspects of their job. You're talking about exhibition, but I'm also talking about producing for those screens. Because at the end of the day, you got to fill the screens with content. And what better content than something that can perhaps strike resonance with audiences in Korea and China simultaneously, which we're only starting to really see now after so many years of trying. So, vertical integration, off the top of my head, I think that they would love to be vertically integrated.
Yeah, I imagine they would. I mean, that's something that's kind of worked very well for them in Korea. Personally, I mean, vertical integration is not something I'm very, very keen on, but it's obviously an effective business model. But in China at the moment, I mean, I forget the statistics. They're either ranked 14th or 18th in the list of national exhibitors in China, whereas of course they're number one by a margin here in Korea. So that obviously it's one thing being vertically integrated when you own 40% of the screens. Another when you have like 1 or 2%.
Yeah, but 1 or 2% of 30,000 screens.
This very big bucket we're talking about.
Yeah. So, but let's not forget that how healthy the VOD market is in China with all the video platforms, and a lot of people want to see films big screen. That's true, and ticket prices are not cheap. I've been to the cinema many times in Beijing, and I'm amazed at how much I'm willing to pay for a ticket. But I don't have any of those local loyalty cards that you can get.
Okay.
So they are available in the multiplex chains.
How much is a ticket, actually, by the way?
I've paid upwards of 120 renminbi, which is about
$8.
No, I'm sorry. No, divide by 6, so $20.
Is this like IMAX 3D or something?
Megabox. No, not 4DX.
2D.
2D Megabox in Beijing in Sanlitun.
My goodness.
But that's me. I mean, it was the right time. I didn't have the loyalty card. I could have paid less than half of that if I had a loyalty card and didn't go on a Friday night. So there's choices. There's there's some options there. But also, whilst the number of screens is growing in China, we're specifically talking about multiplex screens. Now, my first experience in China was 1995. And at that time, there were a bucket load, since we're talking about buckets in our podcasts this time around, there were bucket loads of screens in some very interesting places. And they were and at that time, cinema screens in China usually had like a red velvet curtain in the doorway of the cinema. So I quickly figured out that this was a trope. So I would just walk in to all red velvet curtain spaces. And one funny experience, by the way, not only did I see at a 2,000-year-old temple a very poor copy of Natural Born Killers. So I was in this wonderful monk's relaxing historical pagoda, and there's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of Natural Born Killers on a very large screen, actually, but nobody was in the cinema.
So does that screening happen often there?
I have no idea, like the circumstances, but it was very interesting. That's not the funny story. The funny story is that I was in a one-person cinema in China because one of these red velvet curtains I went behind led down a small stairway to like a closet that had one seat. And it's going to sound a little bit weird, but
it already does.
There is sex involved, actually. There was a sex education videotape playing.
But by yourself.
I'm being honest. I couldn't make this stuff up. It was, it showed female and male anatomy, but animated. Strictly what I thought at the time was educational. Point being that there was this trope of the red velvet curtain, and there were a lot of them. And so today, when we talk about thousands and thousands of screens rolling out, we're specifically talking about multiplexes. But cinema experience in China has been present for at least 20 years that I'm aware of, if not longer, in some very interesting contexts.
So, first of all, we appreciate your candor. This is wonderful anecdotal story of pre-multiplex era exhibition in China. I guess the difference now is with these multiplexes, they bring about new technologies. So these Red Velvet cinemas probably didn't have 3D capability or IMAXs, I'm sure. So, in light of that, we have a company like CGV, which last year was the fifth biggest exhibitor in the world. Not only are they big in Korea, they also operate in majority chains in Vietnam and other countries. But they have pioneered a number of exhibition technologies, primarily 4DX, which is a 3D experience with the added incentive of having kind of moving seats and gusts of air and things like that to create this what they call a 4DX experience. Might this kind of exhibition capabilities give them a leg up in their bid to expand in the Chinese market?
Well, 4DX is novel at the moment, obviously. I mean, have you been?
I have.
What have you seen?
I saw the first Spider-Man. The problem is I'm very tall, and it was not a comfortable experience.
I don't think it's comfortable for anybody, though,
okay,
actually.
Well, I mean, again, you want to talk about technicians and creativity. I know the guy. I know a guy that works for, his main job is to come up with the gimmicks, the translation or the richness of the experience to enhance the experience from converting 2D to 4D.
Turning a movie into a roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly. So my friend Mr. Trey, it's these 4DX films are only as good as his ideas and his team. Now, having said that, who knows how long 4DX will last? It's very novel. How many are you going to be willing to go to in a given year? Maybe a couple. I'm looking forward to seeing The Hobbit in 4DX in about a week. But who knows what's inside the mind of these new Chinese audiences? I mean, I am doing a study on Chinese film fans at the moment with an IT expert at my university at the Smart Infrastructure Facility. And we're hoping to work with a colleague at KAIST in cultural technology, really good guy over there that I met at the KAIST New Media and Cinema event that Pierce and I attended last month. We're looking at the Chinese audience reception of the top 100 Korean films over the last 10 years in China. And our goal is to not only identify a network of film fans that are, and the recommendation practices that they're engaged with, but what are some of the qualities of Korean cinema or the cinema-going experience, for that matter, in China at the moment. We're very excited by that project. It's going to be tough, but it's a quote-unquote big data project, and we're confident that we can uncover some valuable insights that I look forward to sharing maybe in a year's time if you have me back or sooner on your show.
It'd be a pleasure.
But the 4DX question and the exhibition question, I think exhibition has a very strong momentum and future in the Chinese market because there's a cool factor, and there'll always be, I think there will always be a certain number of people willing to go to the big screen, provided they can get that 40 or 60% discount on the ticket price.
Although all this talk has been really enjoyable, we are actually running out of time, so we're just going to jump to the last question for today. So 2014 has been a banner year for collaborations between Korea and China. What does the future hold?
That's an awesome question, and I appreciate you asking me because it shows that you care. But I think if I were to sum it up, there would be three things that come to mind. One is the continuation of the relationship building among the informal networks that some of my work is documenting, the post-production contributions, the non-official co-productions that are occurring, which far outnumber the number of co-productions. It may be that they catch up with each other, but I think we're several years away from that happening. So those are real, organic, network-oriented relationships and projects that are also based on Korea's outstanding reputation for technical ability and technical prowess. It's also based on the fact that Koreans are readily available to work in such projects. That was a key point to Koreans going over to China in the first place, that they're available and they're willing. So we're going to continue to see that. We're also going to see an incredible expansion of the number of small to medium enterprise. That's my number 2 point. The incredible expansion of small to medium enterprises in the Chinese film industry that are both local with international partners. And the third thing is the numbers of audiences willing to or interested in going to the multiplex for that leisure culture that other countries have been practicing for years. It's quite a new middle class phenomenon that seems to be sweeping China at the moment, not only across first tier, second tier, but third tier cities where most of the growth is showing. So those are three intertwining points or thoughts that I think we can expect for 2015 and beyond. But you should have me back on in 18 months, and no doubt I'll have three different points to raise.
Or maybe even earlier.
Well, Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on this two-part episode for Korean Cinema Today. It's been an illuminating discussion, and we certainly do want to have you back again to share new insights when the situation as it evolves in the coming months and years. So, Brian, thank you very much for coming on again today.
Thank you, guys.
And with that, we wrap up our two-part episode on the Chinese and Korean film industries for Korean Cinema Today. Thanks again for listening, and tune in again next time.